Welcome in to Greenville Grit. This is Greenville Residents in Touch with your hosts, Terry Williams and Michael Overton. This is the show that keeps you connected and in touch with the issues that affect what's happening in your community. Greenville Grit is sponsored by Greenville Toyota, the Overton Group. And now, here are your hosts for Greenville Grit, Terry Williams and Michael Overton.
Good evening and welcome to Greenville Grit. I am Terry Williams.
I'm Michael Overton and
I'm Dennis Mitchell.
And Dennis recently got your MBA in business, man. Congratulations
Congratulations,
on
Dennis.
A lot of long nights in the library with kids and a wife. I'm grad's done.
Well, that's fantastic. Congratulations
We're proud
on that.
of you.
And
that's awesome.
And we can't wait to hear some of the things you've learned and what you're going to do to use that to help this city out.
Hopefully I can use it to make some money for myself.
You mean for yourself? It's a little selfish, isn't it?
It is. Very selfish.
Well, Dennis, I know they really need your help in the city. So,
Well, before we get into today's show, we always have to thank the sponsors that allow this show to happen. We got to thank Ribeye Steakhouse. Please make sure you go by there and mention Greenville Grit, and you will get a surprise. I'm not sure what this week's. Last week's was the
shrimp
skewer with the purchase of any entree. I don't know if it's the same or not, but there's something out there at Ribeye Steakhouse. Go by there, support them on Fire Tower Road, and also they have a location in Williamston. Fantastic steaks and salad bar.
Salad bar.
That's your favorite. You talk
Great.
about salad
Love
bar all
the
the
salad
time.
bar.
Also got to think about Kid Construction Group. You can go to kcgbuildgreen.com. Bill Kidd Custom Home Builder, as well as a spec builder, and just does a phenomenal home. Won the Parade of Homes with one of his homes in Windtree Subdivision. Just does beautiful work for fantastic price. Give him an opportunity. Again, kcgbuildgreen.com. The Overton Group, real estate and property management professionals with an office in Greenville and in New Bern. We do commercial real estate leasing and sales, as well as residential sales and business brokerage. And last of all, Greenville Toyota. He's been with us since the beginning.
Yes, we appreciate it.
Toyota or Scion vehicle or new used car, you need your car service, go see Greenville Toyota, and you can visit them on the web at greenvilletoyota.com or call them 321-3000. We're going to take a quick 2-minute commercial break, come right back, and get back into talking about City Council meeting from last week. Welcome back to the Greenville Grit. This is Michael Overton along with my co-hosts, Terry Williams and Dennis Mitchell. Dennis, thank you for coming back on today. We want to talk, I think you had given a response to some of the things that happened at the City Council meeting, and we discussed it too last week on our show. One of the things we heard when all three of us were running for City Council last year was how fiscally irresponsible the council that you and Alan and Max Joyner, Rose, Candy, and Calvin and Marion were on. Of course, Calvin and Marion, or I'm assuming the ones that are calling us out on fiscally irresponsible. But I'm a little frustrated by hearing this, especially now having to deal with the tax increases, which they still claim was because of being fiscally irresponsible. But we're dealing with a $28 million bond that wants to go before the voters, of which most people would hope that a bond is for new things, the big projects that get people excited. But unfortunately, we're dealing with a bond that primarily is going to be for maintenance. And so let's go into this. Let's talk about, I know we want to talk about the vehicle replacement fund again. We don't want to beat this too long, but let's start with the fiscally irresponsible piece. And what you guys did, what you started on your council, to give a little defense to those accusations and where we're at now.
Yeah, I mean, this council meeting was happening Thursday night, and it kind of went on into Friday morning. I was putting the finishing touches on a 40-page paper to get my MBA, and that's what my wife thought I was doing. But every time she came around me, I clicked off of it and started typing this email.
Right.
This email is just so frustrating. I sent it to the entire city council. I said, it's time to really clear this up. I don't know if you guys really don't understand what's going on, or are you just intentionally misleading the voters? So I gave them a history lesson on what the city council did 2 years ago. We were faced with the same issues they were. Staff, if everybody remembers, staff came to us and wanted to raise taxes or go to revenue neutral, which increases the property tax that we're taking from the homes. We said no. We want to go back and look at this budget, find efficiencies. We created a new budget process we've talked so much on here about, the 13 different meetings where we brought these different department heads in here, and we said, okay, we found money. And we found money to do a lot of things. The first year, we didn't touch the the excess funding that comes off the fund balance. We held that money because we didn't know what the property reevaluations were going to come back with.
Right.
But when they actually came back, well, not so bad. We actually increased the revenue a little bit as a city because of some new formula they calculated with the vehicle tax or something like that. So we had like $7 million of excess funding at the end of that first year. So that's where we did the money for the roads. That's where we fixed the 20-year software system that doesn't link to anything that the city works with.
Right.
That's when we looked at we put lighting in high crime areas. That's where the parking deck came out of. That's where we addressed the projected $20 million deficit that the sanitation fund would have.
That's
where we fixed that. Now everyone's getting the new blue trash cans for recycling. That process is getting automated. That fund is actually projected to have a surplus next year. So we really looked at all these different issues, did not raise taxes, and fixed a lot of different things to start them on a path of taking care of that maintenance. So to hear them sit up on the city council, and the charge started with Councilman Rick Smalley on Thursday night, is that the city council last year, they go back to spend down the fund balance, and that's why we're in this situation. No, we balanced the budget.
Right.
Well, and let's talk about spend down the fund balance. We've heard it. You're spending down the fund balance. We're at 14%.
Which is the policy.
Which is our city policy, but still over double what the state says we should have.
Almost double.
So we got to clear almost double. Because what is the state's
8%.
Yeah. So that drives me nuts to hear that, because it's choosing words. It almost goes back to the old Democrat-Republican thing. They pick words and make it sound worse than it is. No citizen should be happy with a city who is not reinvesting the money that we pay in on property taxes. I pay a lot in on property taxes. We should be taking that money and reinvesting in our infrastructure and doing things. Not having a 20% or 18% fund balance.
Well, I think it's easier to explain to the public when you put in a scenario like this. If I say, out of all the money I bring in a month, I'm going to save $500. I'm going to pay all my bills, and I'm going to save $500. Where at the end of that month, I was able to save $700. Well, my roof needs to get fixed now. So am I going to continue to save that $700, or I'm going to go by my budget, put the $500 in the bank, and start putting that $200 towards repairing my funds?
Right.
And that's what we did. We saved more money than we budgeted. So we took
you maintained the 14%
and we
fund
maintained
balance,
what we
which
said
is our city policy.
What we said we're going to do, and we start taking care of these serious maintenance issues the cities are having. We didn't do anything wrong. If the city council believes the 14% is not enough, then they need to address that policy and raise it. And that's my whole thing. So quit saying that we did something that we weren't supposed to do when we followed a policy that was set by city council. If the policy is inaccurate, if we need to say more than 14%, then raise it higher than 14%. That's all I'm saying. Because it's just ridiculous. Because this council, anytime someone started to put pressure on them about them spending money, and that's where the whole conversation came up that Thursday night.
Go back to your council and blame it.
Yeah, it was like, okay, we don't need to raise taxes. We could have used this fund. Well, no, we're in this because of this council. No. And you look at the reasons why you raise taxes. You raise taxes to fund a facility maintenance fund, not to increase your fund balance, to fund a facility maintenance fund. So you raise taxes to address the maintenance issues. So let's be clear about this. Because what came out is that they started talking about the fund balance, which we done beat a while, and it kind of came out what Terry Borman was saying, like, it's kind of true. We do have this additional fund balance that is not accounted for in the 14% that we're not using. The mayor brought it up.
But that's called the vehicle replacement fund.
Well, it's the vehicle replacement fund's fund balance.
But it's also, I believe, the Medicaid or Medicare fund too, or health fund.
It's the health fund.
There's several other funds out there that have excess money in them.
And that's what the city manager brought up. She said all of our funds have cushions on them.
Right.
So Alan, the mayor,
how many funds do we have?
Well, it's so many. I can't remember. It was the health fund, the vehicle replacement fund. It was several other ones that she mentioned, but the mayor was like, so we have all these.
So we ought to charge Terry Boardman, if he's listening tonight, to go through and give us the detail of all the funds we have. It'd be great to know
of the different funds.
Of what the annual budget is for those funds and what kind of cushion we have as a city.
And that's what the mayor was like. So we have all these passive amounts of income sitting there, not allocated to any budget, that's not counted into the 14%. So that's where Rick Smalley was like, well, this last council was like, quit talking about this last council and talk about what you guys are going to do. It's been 8 months, and y'all haven't done anything but raise taxes.
Exactly.
And what the council tried to do.
Successfully.
Yeah.
Twice.
And that's what the council tried to do is like give them some reprieve. It's like, look, we only need $2 million worth of fund balance in this vehicle replacement fund, if that, because it should wash itself out. But leave $2 million in here and use the other $4 million on some maintenance issues and don't raise taxes. But the good thing, the key thing that was found out that night is that the city staff have been using this fund to balance their budget each year. 23% was voted on by this city council to be robbed from that fund, using Councilman Smiley's words, robbed from that fund to balance their budget this year. So instead of just saying we only need this amount in there, they keep the money in there and they use it to balance their budget each year. Is that fiscally irresponsible?
I would say.
You got a fund here, you set it up, but you're using that fund balance for reoccurring budgeting costs. Everybody knows that's city budget.
And then they're charging higher rents to keep that fund
higher,
replenished.
and then you turn around and you take that money to use it when you need to use it. That's not right. Cut the rents to it.
Right. I have two
that's
questions.
what we said last week. The rent is too
high. Well, I have a question. Right here, you were saying that they're expecting a surplus in the sanitation fund in 2016. Then why did we raise sanitation fees? That was the first tax we got, right?
Yeah, you raise sanitation fees because of the whole conversion to the thing. So
to take care of it before there's the surplus that they're expecting.
So the city took care of the sanitation trucks. So the sanitation fund has to pay back the city for taking care of those trucks, because that fund is an enterprise fund, which means it's supposed to be totally self-sustaining.
Okay.
So once it starts getting that surplus, it's going to be time for that to start paying the city back.
Okay, all right. That makes sense about that then. And the other question I have, tell us where all of this money came from that's in the vehicle fund balance right now. Like it's $7 million right now.
It's down a little
down
lower
now, maybe
down
to 5.
They do so many numbers out.
We know that some of it came from rents. Explain so that the citizens understand that, because until you all brought that up, I didn't really understand that each department rented back their vehicles. And that rent goes into this fund, but where else did that money come from?
Well, the city council, I think over a period of 2 years, seeded it with about $4 million. So it started off pretty good. Then like I said, every time a department, they pretty much rent their vehicles back from the fund until they decide to replace those vehicles. Then once those vehicles are sold that they replace, that money goes back into the fund. The surplus goes back into the fund. And any other thing that happens with that vehicles, if there's an accident, the insurance money goes back into that fund, anything. So that fund is like funded from several different sources.
Several places. Okay. So we have 527 vehicles. Do they have some sort of a chart, a plan that says this many vehicles are going to have to be replaced this year, so we need this much money, this many next year, that much money? And so what you're basically saying is in 2 years, if this many vehicles has to be replaced, that will deplete the fund. But in the meantime, these departments are still putting in the rent.
Well, the rents are there to anticipate the cost of a vehicle over a certain period of time when they go to replace it.
So right now, they just voted to replace 16 vehicles for our police chief. At what point did they realize we needed to replace those vehicles? 24 months ago?
Those vehicles are the city manager cleared it up. Those vehicles are actually on the chart. They were allocated to be replaced that time. Okay. So this is the thing about this fund is like it's very concrete. You know what you're going to do.
That's
each
what I'm
year.
getting to.
So they know how much money needs to be in there. So they know ideally for the next 10 years this fund is overfunded, which is why they did something I believe is another fiscally irresponsible thing. By cutting the fund 23% to balance the budget, they're going to have a situation, I think, next year or the year afterwards. I think it's next year, where the fund is going to bring in less money than the vehicles are going to be replaced. They knowingly did that to knowingly use the fund balance to cover that shortage, which to me, again, is doing something fiscally irresponsible.
Sense. Yeah, but at that time, the argument will be, see, we've reduced this fund balance because it was overblown.
Yeah, so, but to me, you're doing it backwards.
Right.
I agree with
Cap the fund balance and credit that money back at the beginning instead of balancing your budget off of
fund balance. And again, I think one of the reasons we keep harping on it, and I would like to know more about other fund balances within the city, but is that year after year, it's continued for the most part to increase almost every year.
Right.
So it is overblown.
Well, the city manager said, because the argument was like we could have used this to not raise taxes. And city manager reminded him, she said, I gave you several funds you could have took from not to raise taxes. So this is where this whole conversation goes back to. This city council did not have to raise taxes. There are too many places they had to go take $600,000.
But Dennis, go back to the budgeting. How many times did they meet to decide on the budget?
They don't. That's the thing, they don't know. And they have
I mean, how many times did they meet to discuss the budget prior to approving the budget?
I mean, they had the workshop section, and then they had
maybe 4.
It was presented, three or 4.
Maybe 4.
And you guys met how many times?
13.
So
and that's
you
why
can't
we know
dig
more about
into just think the general fund budget's almost $80 million.
Almost
you
$100
can't
million.
meet 3 or 4 times and understand what's in that budget.
It's complicated. It is complicated.
Having 2 brand new council members that weren't even on the city council for about 4 months before they even start talking about the budget. I mean, you want to know these things, and that's why I feel like it's a certain naiveness that's just throwing out Councilmember Mercer's words that's coming out of Rick Smalley's mouth. Is like, you really don't know what's going on. That was so frustrating to me about it. It's like, you're not paying attention to what's going on here. Even if you would have looked at what was in front of you last night, you'd say, hey, let's right our wrong. Let's take back this tax cut, this tax increase, and give the citizens back the money and use the money from here. At least until we find what's going on.
The other part of the tax increase was also based on the anticipation of the money we were losing because of the state capping the fees for businesses.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
I mean, the one that we don't know whether we're going to have to raise taxes.
Exactly.
Well, we actually never had the money to begin with. It was anticipated money on the first tax increase proposal that never went through, I think, because the state
and that's the
came
thing.
back and
I mean, and then they go into the whole partisan thing. But I mean, the legislator and the governor said they're going to make sure that they come up with a plan to fill that gap.
Right.
So to me, we should at least take that those words and at least wait to see are they going to be able to do it before we're going to raise taxes. Because I mean, they might try to do some election type thing, tax cut to make it look like they did something. But normal circumstances, you want to expect your government to give you back that money.
Right.
But I think we're probably going to see some election time maneuvering in.
Yeah, you wait.
Yeah.
There'll
you
be
wait
something coming
year.
back.
Part of their argument, we're going to drop taxes.
I think even if the legislative and the governor don't keep their promise, they're going to find a way to drop taxes. But I mean, it's just a shame that the city council, the way they look at this budget, is they really don't have no clue what's going on.
Right.
And that's what bothers me.
Well, just a couple of other quick little questions. In the email that you addressed, why they feel like they have to keep putting money or maintain a certain balance, they must have said, I didn't get to hear the city council meeting last Thursday night, but you talked about the reasons why they said it had to be inflation, accidents, buying the new fire truck. And specifically about the fire truck, you said wrong. They don't use the vehicle replacement
That wasn't
fund.
a replacement.
Yeah.
So explain that a little bit.
I was just trying to thwart all their arguments to why they couldn't cut the vehicle replacement fund, because that was the thing. It's going to be fiscally irresponsible for us to raid and rob this fund. I'm like, you're raiding and robbing it already. Mm-hmm. Councilmember Mercer said, y'all been adjusting this fund since it started.
Right.
So my thing was, like, you can't say because of inflation, because a 3% inflation is already built into the rate that we charge the department. So don't use that argument. You can't because I think Councilman Smalley brought up, if some vehicle gets in an accident, no, you have insurance. I'm also pretty sure that the city has a tail plan to cover the shortfall that might be because of depreciation. But if not, the money's still available there.
Right.
And then the fire trucks. I think the city manager talked about a fire truck, and I'm like, wait, this is a vehicle replacement fund. If you start buying new vehicles out here, you're going to take away the integrity of the fund. You're never going to, have the fund the way it's set up should be. So those things shouldn't happen. No, those new fire trucks are capital expenses. Those are capital projects. Those money should be found elsewhere other than robbing from this fund. So, I mean, you get into the thing where you talk about, are we using this fund correctly? Are we even funding it correctly? So it's just a lot of concerns that came up that night from the city council meeting.
I agree with that. Well, it just all boils down to me is when they were speaking and talking the night that Barbara presented everything about where she could get the other funds, and they automatically just chose the easy way out, not doing their homework. They could have just taken that $600,000 temporarily from one of the over excessive funds, vehicle fund or somewhere else, and then just sat back and waited and looked at our entire picture more closely to see if we were going to need a tax increase or not. Plus, I just don't think that they put enough thought into how this would affect a bond, and that we do need a bond. There's no doubt about it. We've got things to do that are costly that there will be no other way to get that fund than to have some sort of a bond.
But,
so I just think it was irresponsible.
Well, we do need the bond, but going back to the budgetary, is we can pass the bond, but the council has to be fiscally responsible
right.
to fund the maintenance on the roads or the parks or other items that we choose as whatever part of the bond may be, or
That's
else
right.
the bond is for naught. All we're going
That's
to be is
right.
back here in 8-10 years. We got to have another bond to do the maintenance that we didn't do over the last
agree.
10 years. So we
Well, I
do
think-
have to go to a commercial break, our
absolutely.
second commercial break. We're going to come back, wrap it up. So we'll be back in 2 minutes.
Welcome back to the Greenville Grit. We've been having a very lively discussion here about the city council budget. I think all of us get a little excited
I know.
when we talk about the things
Dennis,
that
you were over there sweating.
I to wipe the forehead off. But I mean, it's serious. These
It
are
is
serious
serious.
things for the city. So I mean, we're back. Terry, you got something you want to talk about?
Well,
Want to bring up?
one other item on the Thursday night was they tabled more discussion about the town common and spending the $150,000 on
that they
certain-
snuck to
that
the
they
side
yeah.
as part of the budget. They tabled it
Exactly.
and don't want to
So-
spend the money. Why not, Dennis?
They tabled it because they wanted to take it back to the Parks and Rec Commission. which is-
Recreation and Parks.
Yeah,
yeah.
Recreation and Park, which was curious to me because
Get it right.
this plan has been in place for what, 6-7 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Only elements on there were already on the plan, so the city council just had to make a small decision. Which one of these 5 things that you can pay for $150,000 do you want to
Which
do
isn't
today?
much.
Yeah, what you want to do today? We're going to send it back to the Parks and Rec Commission. For what? Well,
Well, 150,000 is not going to go very far.
No. it's not.
I mean, I think some things were benches, metal park benches,
Mm-hmm.
some trash cans, a floating pier. That I don't
How about a
think
bathroom?
The bathroom they showed was the one that was shown at Dream Park, and I think it was Councilwoman Blackburn who said she didn't want that one. She wanted the nicer one. I think it was for a couple $100,000 more. So the one at Dream Park wasn't good enough. She wants a nice one.
Oh, dear.
So that one's pretty much count. Because I think Councilman Croskery has been the one pushing. Just go ahead and put a bathroom up there, which I think
Right.
is the largest bang for your buck.
Right.
But the one that was shown wasn't, I guess, appealing. It was good enough for the Dream Park, but not good enough for Town Commons. But my thing is this: that $150,000 should be used to go ahead and do the constructional engineering designs of Town Commons. So once we start having money for the phased approach to it, we can begin to fund it. I think throwing $150,000 at something that's probably going to be torn up anyway when we redo the
Well,
Town
that's the
Commons.
unsure part about
Yeah.
it. We really don't know.
I just feel like we've got to have a plan, our master plan that we all residents of the city, the conservatives, the liberals, the park lovers, the park haters, everybody needs to come together and figure out what works and has a little bit of something for everybody. Now, nobody's going to be 100% happy, but if you can get everybody on board with saying, I'm okay with it, let's go forward. And I still don't think we've really gotten to that point. So I have an issue building a lot of buildings on something until we know that this is what we're going to do.
Well, one thing I think that needs to be probably revisited, probably the master plan that was drawn up needs to be looked at again. I mean, it was done, 5 years ago? Or
I think a little longer than that.
It's been a
The
while.
problem is, though, Terry, if we keep drawing up master plans and then we spend 5 years arguing about it, and then we got to do another master
Well,
plan.
when we drew that master plan, if I was on that committee, when we drew that master plan up, we had no money. The budget came out at $13 million, so we had no choice but to sit
we
on
can
it.
start robbing fund balances. We got the money.
Whatever you say.
Hey,
Well, I do think we need to make a fiscally sound decision on the first small phase of whatever we do at Town Common.
I agree.
It needs to be really looked at closely. So we're what else do we want to talk about today, Dennis?
do y'all want my grit?
Sure.
What is your grit?
What's
Well,
your
We're going
grit
to spend
today?
2 minutes talking about your grit.
Well, I mean, it probably sparked another conversation. And my grit was when I sent this email to the city council, I ended it. Well, I started off with a quote from the Japanese admiral from Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
And what was that quote? That quote was, I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve. And I was that sleeping giant because it was 1 o'clock in the morning. So I ended my email with this. I said, it has been 8 months. Quit pointing your fingers and do something besides raise taxes and attend groundbreakings for my initiatives.
Wow, Dennis.
Wow,
my
Dennis.
initiatives.
They were mine.
Mine. me.
It's all right. Go for it.
was
Tell
a
us
very,
about
It
them.
was a very frustrating thing, you
Yeah.
know, to see all this going on. It's like the council of last year, and maybe it's my bias. I think it was probably one of the most one of the most active city councils we had.
Right.
So much was done with using less resources that I think they can actually learn something for that council instead of trying to point the finger at these small
Right.
sound bouts they're trying to do. So if you want to do something, look at how we got things done and turn those best practices
Mm-hmm.
and into something so you can start getting things done.
Right.
So that's my point in a very selfish way.
Okay.
Let's
And
talk.
we'll
just,
go to our
let's just
sponsors.
talk.
We gotta
No,
thank
but
the sponsors.
Let me just say one
Okay,
thing real
go
quick.
ahead.
Next week, we may have Gary Fenton on with Parks and Rec to kind of
Recreation
recap
Parks.
Recreation and Parks to kind of recap what we discussed and what his wants and needs were from the bond discussion. And then next week's bond meeting is about economic development.
Yeah,
so I'm sure we'll have.
that's something
I'm very
keenly
interested in that because
interested in.
lots of things, good things are happening.
Yeah.
and
Of
we
course,
need to know
I'm
about
interested
it.
in because it was my initiative.
Oh,
to
God,
start
please, Jay. Hey, just
Here we
keep the
go.
camera on us, too. We need to thank the sponsors one more time. Ribeye Steakhouse. Go by there, mention Greenville Grit. You do get a prize for mentioning that. Greenville Toyota and Scion. The Overton Group and Kidd Construction Group. You can see them at kcgbuildgreen.com. Thank you for everyone for joining in. We will see you next week.